Hello everybody, it's Kier from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part 1 of my June wrap-up. So I read a bunch of books in June again, so we're back to a 3-part wrap-up. So the first book that I want to talk about is Amazing Muslims Who Changed the World, Extraordinary Stories of Incredible People by Burhana Islam. This is one of those like compilation nonfiction books, and this one is obviously about different Muslim people from around the world and a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different time periods, and I thought this was wonderful. I really loved this. There are several different illustrators. Let me find that. Rhea Ahmed, Dima Alawa, Nabi H. Ali, Safa Khan, Aliyah Jalil, and Agnia Mardia. And I think they were all really lovely. I feel like the different styles were still cohesive, even though each artist did obviously have their own style. Let me see if I can find some good examples here. Noor Inayat Khan is one of the ones that I had heard of, but I didn't know this much about her. She was an incredible person. So I just really enjoyed the art of this one. I really enjoyed learning about some figures who I knew about and some who I'd never heard of. Like, I didn't know about Al-Jahiz, who was coming up with ideas about evolution like a few centuries before Darwin did, and it's possible that Darwin might have read some of his writings. I mean, even if they came up with these ideas separately, that's still really interesting, and I don't think I learned about that before. The stories are also told in a way that is more of like a narrative, like more suited to a read aloud than some of the ones I've read that have been more like straight biographies, which I like those too, but I feel like this one is especially suited to being read to kids, and there are some activities in the back as well that make it, I think, clear that it's intended to be read to kids, but I obviously loved it as well, and I gave Amazing Muslims Who Changed the World 5 stars. Next, I finished The Romantic Agenda by Claire Khan. This is a romance novel that I have heard like very mixed things about, and I totally understand why, and you'll see when I get into my review that there are things I didn't like about this, but this is one of those cases, like normally when I talk about a romance that I had mixed feelings about, a lot of times what'll happen for me is that I really enjoy a lot of things about it, but the main couple didn't do anything for me, or I didn't like them, or I just didn't like them as much as I wanted to. Here it's the opposite, because I had some issues with like the writing and the story, but I loved the romance and the love interest so much that like I was sold on the book. So this is following our main character Joy, who is 30, flirty, and asexual, and she's been secretly in love with her best friend Malcolm for a long time at this point, and she hasn't told him. So when Malcolm invites her to go on this vacation with him where he's basically going to declare his love to another woman, Joy is not thrilled about it, but she does kind of see this as her last chance to, like, you know, tell Malcolm how she feels or to show him what he's missing. So she does end up going along, but then she ends up spending a lot of time with another guy on the trip named Fox, and maybe start having feelings for him instead. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this. I'll start with the things that I didn't love. The writing was very inconsistent for me because some of it I enjoyed, like some of the dialogue was great, but like some of the sentences were very clunky. And I also think as far as the storytelling, there were places that I don't know, it almost felt like we skipped things. Like there were things that would happen in this book that should have drastically changed the way a character acted or felt, and it didn't. So that was kind of jarring, but I did, like I said, really enjoy the romance. I really liked Joy and Fox's scenes together. I really like that because like when Fox learns that she's asexual, consent is a huge thing between them. There's also like a fake dating bit in here that was really fun. And even though Fox does say some ignorant things at first, which Joy, you know, rightly calls him on, he immediately like starts doing better, and he like wants to understand and to be like accepting and to, again, you know, ask for her consent and everything. And I thought that was really lovely. I also found some of the side characters interesting, like Summer, the girl that Malcolm is like declaring himself to. She was really interesting, and I liked the way she was written. Joy also has a cat named Pepper who was adorable, and I also really loved Joy herself. I love that she is so confident, but like she has moments of like self-doubt, but she's overall a very confident person. She loves herself. She knows that she's beautiful. I also really love her interest in fashion and the way that was shown in the book. Also, this is kind of an example of a grumpy sunshine romance that I really enjoyed, because I can be kind of hit or miss with that trope, because a lot of times the grumpy character to me just comes off as like really rude and like an unpleasant person to be around. And I don't find that cute, but I feel like with Fox, he was the kind of grumpy I like, where he's just like very reserved and like standoffish, but then like once you get to know him, he's just like really sweet and wonderful. So I really liked him and Joy, like I've said a billion times. Anyway, so like I see why a lot of people didn't like this. I feel like if I didn't love the romance as much as I did, I would have been a lot more frustrated by the writing and some of the storytelling decisions, and like I could see this being less of a hit for me, but because I enjoyed the romance, I gave The Romantic Agenda 4 stars. Next, I finished Fly with the Arrow by Sarah K. L. Wilson. This is the first book in a fantasy romance like retelling of Bluebeard, the Bluebeard story. So we're following our main character Isolde, and at the beginning of the book, she is left ignorant of something called the law of first grading, and because of what happens as a result of this, she finds herself married and taken off to live with this like Bluebeard character. That's not his name, but that's like what she thinks of him as. And because she doesn't really have much of a choice and she wants to protect her family and her kingdom, she does agree to this. And they get there and it turns out that she's going to be a part of this kind of competition that she doesn't really understand. She also finds out that her husband has been married many times before because, you know, it's a Bluebeard retelling, and that his wives have all died suspiciously. And things kind of go from there. And this is a book, I guess kind of like the last one, like there are things that should have frustrated me more, but I just enjoyed it. Like there are just specific things I enjoyed that this book did that made me have a great time. So for one thing, I really loved Isolde as a main character. She's very, very practical and just like make the best of things, and she finds herself in this wild situation, but she's like, well, might as well do what I can. I just really admired that. I liked her narrative voice in this book as well. I thought her and Bluebeard's relationship was really interesting. They had really good chemistry, so that even though I think parts of their relationship development felt a little bit, I don't know, like inconsistent. It was almost like we hopscotched. Like there were some things that I think should have happened earlier and some that I think should have happened later. But because I thought they had good chemistry, it didn't bother me as much as it could have. And something I'm really impressed with is that because of reasons you find out in the book, Isolde and Bluebeard, they can't speak directly to each other, and that is something in fairy tale retellings I have a really hard time with. Like, it is hard for me to buy into character and relationship development if the characters can't communicate, but I think the way it was handled in this book is some of the best I've seen. I thought that was done really, really well, and there are also just some tropes that I personally enjoy, and I like the way those were used here for the most part. I do think this is another book where the writing was a little inconsistent for me, because there were some parts I loved, there were some great lines. Like I said, I liked Isolde's narrative voice, but there were other parts that felt kind of clunky to me. And then, like I said, I think the romance development itself could have been a little more consistent, a little better developed or better written. But overall, I had a good time with this, and I'm glad to have finally read something by Sarah K. L. Wilson. She's yet another indie fantasy author I've been meaning to try for a while. Also, Intisar Kanani really loves her, so that was another reason I wanted to pick this up. And I gave Fly with the Arrow 4 stars. Next, I finished Missing Lily by Annette K. Larson. This is the second book in the Books of Dalthea series, which is a series of companion novels, but they are consecutive. So far I feel like it's better to read them in order, but I think you could read this one and get what's going on, no problem. We're following our main character, Lylan, but she goes by Lily in this book. And one day she's coming back to the palace after a trip, and she ends up getting like chased in the forest by she doesn't know who, and she's really scared. She ends up getting injured and taking shelter at this manor house, and it turns out to be owned by Lord Fallon. And he's really kind to her, he's really accommodating, they start to grow closer, but Lylan ends up finding some things in his house that makes her wonder if she's actually safe here, and that maybe she shouldn't actually tell him who she really is, that she's a princess of the royal family. And I enjoyed this one. I overall liked it less than book one, which was surprising to me because the premise of this one appealed to me a lot more than book one did. But I did enjoy it. I found Lily / Lylan and Fallon to be very likable characters. I do really like that the identity conflict was resolved pretty early, although that also meant that their relationship didn't have as much build-up as I would have liked, but I do like that there wasn't a lot of like lying to each other. I also found Lorena a super interesting character. She is one of Lily's sisters, and she's going to get her own book later in the series, and I just find her fascinating. She's not a terribly pleasant character sometimes, but I think she's really interesting, and I really like the way that her story in this book shows that you can sometimes love somebody and that doesn't fix everything, you know, that doesn't make your relationship work. And I just thought that was it was really interesting, and I thought that was really well done, especially as that contrasts to some of the other characters in this series. And I also really like the emotional depth here, the way that these relationships and these feelings of love can be very complicated and messy. Like, the emotional lives of these characters just feel very realistic and very well written. As far as things I didn't like I said, I wanted more from the romance, and I also just wasn't as into this romance. Like, Lylan and Fallon were very likable people, but I didn't really feel much of a spark from them. Like, I wanted them to be together because I wanted them to be happy, but I wasn't like excited about it, you know? And another issue I had with this book is I didn't love how some of the classism discussion was handled, or like not handled by the end, because there were a couple of moments where it felt like we were really going to deal with like the privilege of being royal and how that would like how that plays out, how that could affect ordinary people, and then it kind of felt like that subplot was dropped. I am hopeful that we'll see more of that in later books, but I just wish that had been handled differently here. But I did enjoy this, even if it's probably not going to be one of my favorites in the series, and I gave Missing Lily 3.75 stars. Next, I finished the Tea Dragon Tapestry by Kate O'Neill. This is the third and final volume in the Tea Dragon Society series, or the Tea Dragon series, and this was a present from my lovely friend Katie from A Sea of Tomes, and this was a lovely little mood boost, as I expected it to be. As always, the art and colors are just gorgeous. The story is so cozy and warm and wholesome. I love these characters. I love the tea dragons and like the setting and the magic and everything. And I liked the emotional stuff in this volume and the themes. My only complaint with this series is one that I have thought like throughout the volumes, and that is that I'm still weirded out by the humanoid and like animal creature romances. Like, I just think that's odd and like unnecessary. Like, there's no reason that the animal-esque characters had to be drawn that way. Like, I feel like we could have had them drawn more similarly to the humanoid characters. I don't know, it just creeps me out, but I didn't take points off because everything else about this I loved so much, and I do like the characters and their relationships. I just wish they had been drawn in a way that felt a little bit less like humans and animals falling in love, you know? But anyway, I loved this, and I gave the Tea Dragon Tapestry 5 stars. Next, I finished Kingdom of Ruses by Kate Stradling. This is the first book in the Ruses of Lenore series. I have been continuing to really enjoy Kate Stradling's books. I just think she is such a creative fantasy writer. So this is the first book in a companion trilogy. We're following our main character Viola Morland, and her and her family are kind of the stewards of this kingdom, and they rule it on behalf of the Eternal Prince, who's in charge, and he like keeps their kingdom safe with his magical powers and everything. But the catch is that the Eternal Prince does not actually exist and has never existed, and Viola and her family are constantly like trying to keep this information from the public, because her and her family are actually very good rulers and caretakers, but they're worried about like the unrest if this information got out, and also that their kingdom would be invaded because they're pretty small, and one of the only things keeping the other kingdoms at bay is the knowledge that the Eternal Prince is protecting them with his magic. And then one day a guy shows up who claims to be the Eternal Prince of Lenore, and of course Viola and her family can't deny that because they don't have a real prince to show instead. And then he and Viola end up working together and uncovering some information about the magic of this kingdom, about who this mysterious man is. There's a lot of like political stuff in this book, and I really enjoyed this. I think the premise is fantastic, and I feel like the book really lived up to that premise. Like, I really enjoyed the plot. There were also some things that like I had figured out, and I really liked the way those were done, but then there were things that I did not see coming and that really surprised me, and I really liked the way those were used. I also really loved Viola as a main character. I do think that the male lead, whose name we don't learn until partway through the book, he was a little bossier than I tend to like. So that wasn't my favorite thing, but he did kind of realize that a little more as the book went on, and Viola like was very comfortable standing up to him and arguing with him. So even though he was still kind of pushy, it didn't bother me as much as I could have. Like, I did like some of their scenes together and their dynamic, and I also really liked the magic in this book and like the different like uses for magic, the way magic is incorporated into this kingdom, some of the different like magical beings that you learn about. I just really enjoyed all of that, and I feel like this book also, like, I think Kate Stradling really thought through everything, like with this book, like the way that she would like set up little like connections or plot points. I just really enjoyed. So really liked this, and I gave Kingdom of Ruses 4 stars. Next, I finished A Snake Falls to Earth by Darcy Littlebadger. This is a standalone book, and we are following 2 main characters. One of them is a cottonmouth boy named Ollie, who lives in kind of the land, I forget what they call it. Is it like the world of spirits? The land of spirits and monsters. And then our other main character is a human girl named Nina who lives on Earth. And she is trying to translate a story from her, I think, great-grandmother that she thinks is really important about their home and protecting their home. And then Ollie ends up getting kind of wrapped up in her story because he gets sent out on his own to live by himself, and he ends up collecting this group of like other animal spirit companions. And then eventually that group and Nina end up colliding, like their stories combine. And I really enjoyed this. I had heard that a lot of people were disappointed in this one compared to Elotsawe, which I loved. That was one of my favorite books of the year when I read it. And I actually am glad that I waited so long to read this one, because even though I had pre-ordered it, I only obviously just got around to it. But I think that was good because I think it helped me separate my feelings for Elotsawe from what this book was, because these are very different stories. And I ended up really enjoying it. Like, I think I do prefer Elotsawe, but this was really well done. I loved our main characters so much, especially Ollie. Like, he's just so sweet. There's something about this, like, cottonmouth boy. He, like, wears glasses because he's, like, nearsighted. just warms my heart. I love him. And I love how like kind he is, and I really love Nina as well. I love the friendships between all of these characters. Like I love the teamwork and working together. I love what this book says about homeland and like the environment and language and storytelling. Like all of those themes I think were beautifully incorporated into the plot and into this book in general. I also have to show off the cover of this one because we've got our little like a little gang of characters whom I loved. Yeah, I just really enjoyed this. I also love Darcy Little Badger's writing. It's very smooth feeling. And I also, like, I didn't mind what a slow-paced start this was. Like, we're really spending a lot of time getting to know Ollie and Nina separately, and like as they kind of like learn more about the world, and especially as like Ollie meets other characters and everything. So it's quite a while before their paths cross, but I didn't mind that because I loved both of them so much. And again, I love Darcy Little Badger's writing and her world building and the way she slowly builds up the story. It didn't bother me, but that is something to keep in mind, is the two main characters don't meet until pretty late into the book. But I really enjoyed this. My one critique would be that I think the ending was like kind of abrupt and anticlimactic, but overall I really enjoyed this, and I gave A Snake Falls to Earth 4 stars. Next, I finished Priceless, How I Went Undercover to Rescue the World's Stolen Treasures by Robert K. Whitman with John Schiffman. This is a nonfiction book that I read for an outside thing, and I probably wouldn't have picked this up except for that, but I'm glad I read it. So this is part memoir and part look at the FBI art crime team. Robert K. Whitman is like the founder of that, and he was really like the entire art crime team for quite a while. And it talks a lot about how he went undercover to like rescue stolen art pieces and artifacts from museums. And like I said, part of this is also a memoir. And again, I'm glad I read this. I learned a lot about art. I thought it was very interesting. My favorite parts of the book were definitely when he was talking about the art history and the cultural importance of these things. Like that was definitely my favorite part of the book. I think that the writing was best when he was talking about what it means, like how these objects are full of history and like why that is so important. Like when he talks about why he's so passionate about art and about rescuing art, I really enjoyed that. And I also really enjoyed seeing, like learning more about some of these museums, like the Barnes, is it Barnes Foundation or something? That one sounds fascinating. I love the idea of this museum that has all of these different rooms that are like themed, like each room is like a classroom basically, where they have like what looks like an eclectic collection of art pieces, but they're made to make you think about them. And like, I just think that sounds fascinating. And it was also interesting learning about some of the like heists or counter heists almost that he was involved in to try and get these pieces back. There's also a lot of like bureaucracy, and like it is very, very frustrating like reading about like the like posturing that got in the way of rescuing these like priceless, you know, like pieces and artworks, that basically people's ego kept them from rescuing like these important works of art that are still missing. So that was very frustrating. I wasn't a big fan of the memoir parts though. I just felt like those were very clumsily integrated into the rest of the book. And they just weren't written in a way that was super engaging. And maybe it's that I was wanting something from this book that it wasn't trying to give me, but like just the way those pieces were written was, you know, not, I feel like not as well done as the rest of the book. I feel like the transitions were really odd. Like it would be, he'd be like thinking about like an art deal that he was on, and he would see a boat and he would go, oh, that makes me remember a time when I was a kid and I went on a boat with my father or something. Like that's not a real example, but it was that kind of thing. And I do also want to mention that the author, like he only glancingly refers to the fact that sometimes museums are the ones stealing artifacts or art pieces. He doesn't talk about that a whole bunch. So if that's what you want from this book, it's not trying to do that. But again, I did think this was interesting. I'm glad I read it. I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it. I just think that there are pieces of this that are a lot more engaging and interesting. But I definitely learned a lot about art and art theft, which I didn't know very much about. And like I said, I think the way, like I actually wish that this book had been structured as like a series of case studies, which some of the chapters are, where he would talk about a certain art piece and he would really go into the history and the cultural importance of these things, because I really loved those chapters and I kind of wish the whole book had been like that. But again, maybe that's not what this book was trying to do. Anyway, I did enjoy this. I got a lot out of it, and I gave Priceless 3.75 stars. Next, I finished I'm Afraid of Men by Vivek Shraya. This is a very, very short essay that was a gift from my lovely friend Kier from Kier the Scrivener, and I thought this was fantastic. Vivek Shraya is a trans woman, and so this essay is really about her experience of masculinity and how that was like enforced on her and how she views it and like the way that she interacts with men. Like as you can see by the title, I'm Afraid of Men, and then on the back it says men are afraid of me. So this talks a lot about transphobia and homophobia, also internalized misogyny, and it is just, it's so well done. Like, it's such a short essay, and yet I'm still struggling to like communicate how much this essay does. Highly would recommend it. It's a very quick read, but it is so effective. Like, the depth here is fantastic. Shreya really covers a lot of just really important ideas and topics about feminism and homophobia, and then she also covers things that I hadn't thought about in this certain way before, or that she just phrases them in a way that I hadn't heard before. Like, one of the things she talks about that I think is so interesting is she talks about this myth of like one of the good ones, you know, like talking about like some of the men that she's dated, and she talks about how that distinction hurts people. Like, that is not productive to view like you know, like to view like a group of men as like monsters and then a couple of them as like perfect who don't do anything wrong. Like, that is not good. That's not productive. And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, like, I'm not doing a very good job of explaining this or summarizing it, but I highly recommend this essay. Again, it is so short, so it won't take you long, but I think it is so effective. And I gave I'm Afraid of Men 5 stars. And then finally, the last book I'm going to talk about in this part of the wrap-up is A Civil Contract by Georgette Heyer. So this is following our, I guess he's our main character, Adam Deverell, who returns from the Peninsular War, unexpectedly finds his family on the brink of ruin and his ancestral home mortgaged to the hilt. And the only way he can really get them out of this is to marry a wealthy woman, which he does. Her name is Jenny Charlie, and he's not happy about it, but he's, you know, determined to do the best he can. And it's really hard for him because he and this woman Julia are really in love with each other, but they can't marry because he doesn't have enough money for that. So Adam is technically our protagonist in that I think he's always or almost always our point of view character, but Jenny is definitely a main character as well, and then Julia is also very prominent, and like the relationship between these three people, because Jenny and Julia are also friends, and like that is like really the emotional heart of this story, and it's just about Adam and Jenny, like their marriage and their lives together and trying to make the best of things. And this is like a very quiet story, and it's not very romantic. It's really different from most of Georgette Heyer's books, and this is also very different from most books that have the marriage of convenience trope. This is a very unromanticized version of that trope, which it's a trope I love, and so reading it in this context was very interesting. I actually really enjoyed our 3 like central characters. I am surprised at how much I liked Adam, actually, and I really feel for him and Julia, and especially Jenny. Like, Jenny is definitely my favorite of the 3. I just love her so much, and I just, like, me and Hannah have been talking about like justice for Jenny. Like, we just want her to be happy and loved the way that she deserves, and she's just such a strong character, and I feel like she's such a wonderfully written character because, like, you can see that even though she's plain, even though she doesn't really understand the rules of high society, like, she's not very glamorous, she still has this like beautiful heart and these dreams, and I just love her so much. I think the way all of these character relationships were communicated was really well done. I really liked some of the side characters. I of course always love the writing of Georgette Heyer's books, and the humor is great. My only complaints with this one is that I didn't love the way Julia's storyline was resolved. Like, by the end, I think it made sense. I see what the author was doing. I just wish it had been accomplished differently or set up better, because I didn't love the way her storyline ended or the way that was written. And then also I wanted a more romantic ending for Jenny. Like, I understand why it's not. I understand how that fits into the novel as a whole, but I think it's what Jenny deserves. Like, I think she deserves a little more romance. But I thought this was really well done, and as predicted, this is one of my favorite Georgette Heyers that I have read. Also, I love that Adam is not a rake. I have talked about before how the relationship between the rakishness of the hero and my enjoyment of a book is an inverse relationship, like inversely proportional. Like, I just hate that trope. So I really liked the way that Adam wasn't that at all. And like I said, I really do feel like these characters were doing their best, even though it frustrated me to see Adam not realize how wonderful Jenny was all the time and like what she wanted. But anyway, this was very good, and I gave A Civil Contract 4 stars. Okay everybody, so that was the first part of my June wrap up. Please comment down below and let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!